welcome all. Yet another session, right? So, I hope you all are enjoying the Testmute 2024, and it's been a great learning opportunity since we have started, right? So, today we have a special guest. So, before we begin and I introduce you to the speaker, uh, I'm Abdul, your host for the session. I would like to introduce Paul, a senior principal automation architect at Nerdery. Paul is following his passion for providing technology solutions to testing, QE, and QA organizations, including automation assessments, implementations, and activities benefiting the broader testing community. An accomplished keynote speaker and writer, Paul has spoken at both local and national conferences and meetings. Before I hand over the stage to Paul, there are a couple of things I would like you all to please note. All the sessions are being recorded. You can watch it later on the official YouTube channel of LambdaTest. The session will be followed by a Q&A session, right? You will find a little toggle that says Q&A on the right pane of the screen to ask the questions, right? And today's topic for the session is extra automation declared software. Interesting, isn't it? Okay, so I would like to hand over the stage to Paul. Over to you, Paul.
All righty. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking your time, everyone. And thank you for Lambda and for TestMu for having me here. But yes, we are going to talk about automation being software. And as soon as my clicker starts working, we'll get right to it. There we go. So I am Paul Grizzaffi, a senior principal automation architect at Nerdery. At Nerdery, we're a full house consulting firm, and we also do testing and automation specific engagements as well. I've been at this for a very, very long time. I've been doing this for over 30 years, focused on automation or automation adjacent activities. I'm also an advisor to the Advanced Research Center at UT Dallas, which is a fancy way of saying I give lectures 3 or 4 times a year. And if you want to talk to me about Selenium or automation in general, or Slayer or Metallica, I can talk equally well about all those things. And if you would like to contact me outside of this particular forum, here are all my contact things. I don't use Mastodon very much, but I do use the others pretty regularly. And that bottom link is my my blog, where I write hopefully cogent things. Hey, look, I'm even shaved and showered and everything for y'all today. But anyway, before we get going, let's just launch this out. That automation is software. It doesn't matter what you're using. If you're using AI, if you're using record and playback, if you're using drag and drop, it's all software somewhere. Either it's software under the hood, behind the curtain, and certain things of software development actually creep into and are material to automation development. Why? Here's why. So I don't know how many people here are old enough to remember a VCR, a video cassette recorder, but we used to talk about programming, literally programming the VCR to watch shows, to record some shows on a magnetic tape so we could go back and watch it later. So we had to sequence which one's going to come on which channel, which one's going to come at what time. Is it Eastern time? Is it Western time? I mean, Pacific time? Is it, do we need to schedule a little extra time to go over the end? Because we have to have some logic. We had to do some things to get this done. And there was code, right? Now here, what we're talking about is it's either typing in things on the buttons on the device itself, or if we had a nice one, we could use the remote control and it would display a scheduling screen to us on the TV to be able to set up whatever we're going to do. And we could set it up for, again, if we had a sophisticated one, every Tuesday at 2 o'clock or 8 o'clock or whatever, we could record a particular show. And we said, "Nah, sometimes it runs over." So we would record it for not an hour. We recorded for an hour and 2 minutes to make sure we didn't miss that last little bit. This is all programming. It really, really is. But what could go wrong with our programming? When we talk about actual programming of software test automation, what could go wrong? Well, it only works on my machine. Had a client one time that the automation that another company created for them worked on one laptop. I don't know why, and they didn't know why, and then they didn't have the company anymore. It only worked on that one machine. If you try to run it on another machine, it did not work. Or it stopped working on my machine. Hey, everything's cool, oh, now stuff's broken. What's going on there? It can be expensive to maintain if we don't build it correctly. And the won the lottery problem, a lot of times we call this the hit by a bus problem. But basically, let's say the person that created your automation and runs your automation won the lottery and said, "Peace out, I'm gone." And the next day, you don't have any transition plan for that stuff, right? Now you have to go back and retrofix, and retro learn all that stuff. So how do we approach this whole thing, right? We approach it from an actual software development standpoint. We think about it from the development considerations. We think about it from the maintenance considerations. No time to learn new things, bro. Okay, whoever put that in, thank you very much. That's funny. But yeah, you have to worry about the maintenance, the documentation, and we'll get to that in a second, and the stewardship. And this is a term that I learned from a guy I worked with, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. We'll talk about that as well. But the development considerations, we have to develop the automation. But AI is going to do the things for us. AI is going to create the tasks. It's going to create the tests. It's going to run the tests. It's going to tell me the answers. Bzzz. It can help you with that, but it's still software under the hood, behind the curtain, somewhere. You are sequencing things to get done. If you don't know who Grady Booch is, go Google him. Phenomenal computer science mind. And I will closely paraphrase something he said as best as I can. And that is, we have to tell AI things in a very specific language, in a very specific way, and then check its output. Yeah, that's called programming. It really is, right? So it's all programming on some level. Think back to your VCR example there for those of y'all that ever had to do that. So still, it's software somewhere under the hood, and we still need to work on it. So what do? We have to design. We have to figure out what we're doing. Which code are we going to write? Which problem are we trying to solve? Which prompt are we going to give ChatGPT or Bard or whoever, right? I live in the QA world, but ultimately I'm a designer, a developer, right? I don't sit down and say, I think I'm going to write an if statement. No, what I do is I figure out what I'm going to try and accomplish, and that's the design part. So we have to do that. Do we have to create it, right? Then there's the key typing. AI can help us with that, or it can't, depending on what you're doing. And then we start getting into the more mundane, less fun, but essential aspects of software development. We have to store this stuff somewhere. What are we going to store? We store our source code. Do we need to store our prompts? Do we store our logs? And we'll get to logs in a minute because that's really the product of what we're creating here. We have to test. We have to test what we created because, again, it is software. And part of testing is some inspection. We need other people to look at what we're doing and give us sort of that second set of eyes. And there will be, the delivery. We'll get to the delivery part. I didn't have a better pun for this, so we're stuck with baby delivery here. But we have to put that software somewhere that it can be used by other than the author. a lot of times these days, this goes into some sort of repository, and then yeah, pizza delivery, very nice. Um, yeah, I'm over here looking at occasionally at the comments coming up. Y'all are funny people, man. But yeah, so we have to deliver this to somewhere, and again, it's often a pipeline or some sort of repository that's going to run in Azure DevOps or Jenkins or something like that to run all this stuff for us. But again, it's software. Again, even if it's AI and prompts and all these things, we're going to make mistakes. Mistakes happen. Mistakes happen in the software. Mistakes happen in how we use the software. So we have to allow time to address bugs. And then this one's in the nice red box because what is the product of test automation? Right? If you think about the product of what you're doing at your job in the big picture, Amazon, the product is delivery. Nobody wants an app. Nobody wants software except weird geeks like me and a few of y'all out there, right? People want to think in their head, man, I'm almost out of detergent. I need the detergent to come. And they want it to magically appear on their front door. Actually, they really want it to magically appear in the cabinet or wherever they store the detergent. In the meantime, until we can magically think of stuff, we have software to help bridge that gap. So nobody wants software. We use it as a means to an end. The means to an end for test automation is information. And the information comes out in the form of logs, errors, and reports. So we have to have good information coming out so that we're valuable. So wait a minute, you mentioned testing. So you're actually telling me that I need to test the stuff, the tests we wrote? Yeah, you do. You really do. Now, am I saying write a unit test for each of your test scripts? No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is if you have a particular or a specific set of steps that might be um, a good example or a good feeding area for bugs, you might want to test it. You might want to run some unit tests. Certainly, you want the humans to run stuff because who is test automation helping? It's helping humans, right? If you think about what we're doing, corporations have goals, and every line of code that gets written should be in line or at least tangentially in line with those goals. What does testing do? Testing exposes risks to those goals. And what does test automation do? It helps force multiply that, right? It helps the testers be more efficient, more effective, or both to delivering that information. So everything is in support of the other thing. So test automation is in support of humans. And if humans don't trust what the test automation is doing, they won't trust it. And I mean, that's a tautology, but basically, if you don't trust what it's doing, you're going to go back and redo some of that work. So there's a bunch of wasted effort there. So you must trust it. How do you trust it? You watch it. When the new script comes out, you have a look at it. You check it out. You say, what is that doing? What is that doing? I saw something happen on the screen just now that I did not expect. Is that important or is it not? So humans have to be involved in this. And those humans, at least a subset of them, have to be testers. And yes, code review, absolutely. We'll get to that in a minute. So what are our work items for test automation? A lot of times people, we're doing Azure, we got Jira and we got Azure. I mean, we're doing Agile. So we got Azure DevOps and we got Jira or we got whatever. And it just says testing or it says QA. No. That's not how it works. We need to break each of these individual tasks out so that everyone understands the scope of the work that's going on. I mean, we do, right? The people that do the work, we understand this. But if you talk to a program manager, if you talk to a developer, they may not understand all the pieces that we have here. So here's some of the things: the programming, the creating of the test script. Again, even if it's AI, You've got some sort of prompt you got to put in, and make sure you get a reasonable answer out. And if you don't, there's a problem with the software, or there's a problem with your prompt. So you got to work through that programming thing. And the testing part, you have to make sure it is sufficiently applicable. It does the things that you want it to do. Perform it. It has to be perform it. And then there's documentation, and we'll put me up on the news here in a couple of minutes on documentation. But there has to be some level of information that says this is what I'm expecting this thing to do, and then a review. So, like somebody just said, code review, script review, whatever you want to call it. But you can't just say we have these things, right? We have to schedule in the review and the rework, because if we're not going to rework it after the review, then why do we review it, right? You have to schedule in the rework. If it's anything appreciable, you might have to retest. If it's anything super appreciable, you might have to re-review. So we need to figure all of this stuff in. And there might be other stuff. Different organizations have different requirements, different processes. So there may be other things for your particular organization. Now, with regard to coding and documentation and stuff, don't do what we did back in the mid 90s. I was working in a telecommunications company, and we had 3 different teams. If you put it all together, it was, I don't know, 25 or 30 people, and we all got into a room and we decided to build coding standards. How do y'all think that went? What we wound up with was 4 or 5 rules and a whole bunch of recommendations that people could or could not follow, even to the extent of tabs shall be somewhere between 2 and 7 spaces. That wasn't helpful. So what you might want to do when you're building standards is look at what everybody else is doing. I generally don't advise that that everybody else should go and do what everybody else is doing, right? If you look at Google and see what they're doing with their testing and automation, you know what? You're not Google. You don't have those deep pockets. You don't have that number of people. However, when it comes to this kind of thing with the standards and the sort of the rules and things, it's a really good place to start. But really, don't do what we did. It was a horror show. Maintenance. For those of you who have been in automation for a while, I'm going to tell you things you know. Maintenance is usually the highest cost of your total cost of ownership from an automation standpoint if you did not plan for it to be low maintenance up front, right? Because the cost of creating scripts, which is a lot of what tool vendors and they all focus on that, going, you can create script in minutes or seconds or whatever. That's awesome. But what happens when my product changes? What happens when I discover an issue in my code, right? Either my test automation code, my product code, or my data or whatever. We want to minimize this cost of ownership. We want to minimize this because over time, maintenance is what's going to kill you. And therefore, much like regular software, we have to treat it as software, because what can happen in maintenance, right? We can have bugs. Certainly, stuff is broken. Stuff breaks. Got to fix it. Product parity. This is something products don't have to worry about, right? I added a new feature. Awesome. I added a new feature to that step. I added a new step to that feature. Also awesome. The automation also needs to change there. So there needs to be the understanding that there's going to be effort related to and according to whatever product changes we make. The larger the change, the larger the automation effort. And that's fine. But we need to talk about it. We need to have it in the plan. Back to those steps I said earlier, the maintenance and the re-review and the rework. This is all part of that. And there are infrastructure upgrades. Oops, Selenium put out a new version and it broke XYZ. Or Playwright put out a new version and now it has these other capabilities we didn't have before, and we want to exploit those. And results audits. So just take a second, and usually when I do this in live like in-person things. I make people raise their hands to embarrass them, but also to so I can see what's going on. But who looks at their test results? Okay, I'm assuming everybody raised their hands. Who looks at their success results? I'm expecting fewer people raise their hands, right? Because if you have a success, you say, it passed. Awesome. But did it do the right thing? We need to go and have a look at both, certainly focus on the fails, but we need to at least audit the passes to say, do we still understand, still trust, and still want what this particular test script is doing? We need to do that. Otherwise, we just have a bunch of cruft that we have to manage through, and it's not a good use of our time. So associated with that, there are expiration dates on our tests. Or there could be. Some tests have expiration dates, especially early on in our development cycle. A lot of people really get hung up with, we're going to have a test case or test script or test whatever for each of our acceptance criteria. All right, that might be a laudable and appropriate situation for early in the development cycle. But at some point, it seems like those should have been absorbed into other test scripts, or we can trust that other test scripts will take care of it. So we need to go and have a look and say, what can we get rid of? What can we consolidate to make us, again, more effective and more efficient? Because that's what test automation is supposed to do. Help us be more effective or more efficient, or hopefully both, as testers. And then appropriate documentation. Now, earlier I had why with a question mark. Now I have why with an exclamation point. And that's important because, again, automation is declared as software. If y'all looking at these quotes, y'all can go Google them or stuff later. But really, it's documentation is not about what. Documentation is largely about why. Why did you do this and not that? This looks far more intuitive. That is less intuitive. But if that is the thing that's more important, then you need to document why I didn't do the thing that is more intuitive because ABC. And with documentation, it's a trick. It is. It's a balancing act. Just enough. You don't want too much because people won't read it. You don't want too little because you don't have enough. And API documentation is really important, especially if you are working with things like REST and SOAP and all. Things like Swagger are super important and super helpful for us. You kind of want the documentation to be a quick start and also a programmatic assistance. And then, yes, if you're actually writing actual code, you should comment your code. And yes, that totally makes me a heretic. All right. And I'm good with that. Code comments are important. Code comments are important. And I can't emphasize that enough. But again, the code comments should not be, here's what this code is doing. The code comment should be, here's why it is implemented this way. Because I will right here raise my hand and everything and say, self-documenting code is best. But self-documenting code can't always tell you the why unless you're going to have a big, giant function name or variable name. Yeah, that is what code comments are for. Oh, but wait, they're going to get out of sync with the code. Remember that code review part? Yeah, part of your code review is reviewing the comments as well to make sure that they're in sync. Then when it comes to user documentation, again, don't do what we did back at the telecommunications company. We had I think it was a 250 something page user guide for people using our test automation platform. Nobody read that. And then we had a 500 or something page infrastructure and implementation guide for if you wanted this particular telephony interface or that telephony interface. The first one was basically useless. Nobody read it. The second one was super useful, and people would just go right to the right section they want. Oh, I want to do ISUP. So I'm going to go to the ISUP section, and I'm going to instrument ISUP. Yeah. So looking at where you use your documentation and the people who are going to actually eat it. And yes, the clean code gain, it can hunt me down all they want. I wrote a blog on it. I live and die by that blog, and I will continue to do it, sir. But yeah, it's just the right amount. Figure out who your users are, what they need, and give them just that. No more, no less. And stewardship. This is the one that the guy I used to work with was telling me about that. And Chris Slocum, you know who this is. QA, testing, QE, whatever we call ourselves. We're not the owners of quality. We're the stewards of quality. We're the people who are responsible for helping the software be appropriately qualitied, for lack of a better term, for our users, our customers, our clients, whatever we have there. Because again, automation is software, so we have to treat it like software. But when it comes to processes and sort of oversight and stewardship, we have to decide early on, okay, who is making the rules here? Who is reviewing? Let's be consistent, much like we are in our software development. Let's treat it in our automation development as well. Arbitration process. Look, I want it to use an if, you want it to use a case. That's a petty argument, but if we get down to that, then who's deciding, right? Is there a person? Is there an architecture board? Whatever. But figure that all out early so that everybody gets used to it. And we want practitioners actually on this deciding process, right? I've been accused of being an ivory tower architect simply because they didn't realize what I was doing in the background. But yes, you have to be a practitioner. You have to be eating that dog food, or like some people say, right, drinking your own champagne, because apparently champagne's better than dog food. But you need to be using that stuff so that you can give a good practitioner opinion on it. So one of my recommendations here, just from a coding standpoint. So I added the question mark literally half an hour before this talk, but store your automation code with product code. In general, this is a good idea. However, there may be circumstances where it is beneficial for you to have a separate repo for your automation code than your product code. You will have to figure that out, and it largely has to do with pace of releases versus pace of automation creation and some of the other sort of things that hang in there. So I don't have a strong opinion on that, but if someone were to ask me in general, I would say, yeah, let's store it all in one place. Then everybody gets to play with it, right? The automation people get to play with it. The test people get to play with it. The developers get to play with it. Hell, even the product managers and all could pull it out and run it and say, what's this look like for me? And review the code prior to merging the branches. Why? Number one, you got to do code review anyway. Number two, before the merge, of course, you don't have to go back and pull out another branch to do all that stuff. And focus on maintainability. Over time, like I said before, maintenance will eat your lunch, and maintenance will absolutely erode your cost of ownership in a negative way. So make it easy to maintain. And then use tools and frameworks that facilitate that maintainability. And then again, appropriate documentation, not what. What is a very, very rare circumstance that we should put into documentation. The why is much more important because the what can almost always be inline documented with readable code and maintainable code and self-documenting code. The results and logs in domain jargon. The less time you have to spend looking up what a log or an error or result means is less time you have to spend on debugging. And debugging, fixing bugs, maintenance, again, it all chains together. And you probably need some sort of automation leader, right? Somebody who is either christened or or anointed or hired in as this is the automation leader because they understand how this larger picture is supposed to look. But again, AI, we got AI to do all the things. Well, we don't have AI to do all the things, right? I'll use Jason Arbon's name again, is what I was doing before, and I like this approach, is to treat AI as an intern or a new hire or a new grad that says, hey, go do this thing for me, and you bring it back, and then you evaluate the results. Jason goes completely to the other side that says, no, treat it as the smartest person in the room and then ask it questions. There are no wrong answers at this point. The only wrong answer is to do things irresponsibly in a way that potentially damages your team, your organization, your business goals, whatever. Do things responsibly. Do the things that make sense for you. All right. For those of you that dozed off, we're going to get to the TLDR here. So automation is software. And again, I don't want to hear anything. Actually, you know what? I will hear everything about AI scripts and prompts and stuff not being software, because at some point in the process, there is software that we have to treat like we treat the other software, even if it's just down to the results and stuff like that. So when we actually look at what we're developing, consider what our development teams are doing. Hey, what are you doing there? Where do you store your code? Which static code evaluator are you using? We should probably use the same things. We might need to tune them because while automation code is software, it's not the same as production software. That has different needs and different cadences and such. And we should comment our code. But the comment should be a why. And we really, really, really need to focus on maintenance, because maintenance will kill us if we don't focus on it. And when it comes to AI, be responsible. And one last thing, automation is software. Treat it that way. Here's my contact stuff, and I think we have time for questions. Yes?
Yes, Paul. So before we take up the questions, I really wanted to say that it was indeed insightful. And of course, I'm sure that our audience definitely enjoyed the session. Right. So we still have time. So we are going to take up the questions. I'm going to put it on the screen. Right. Okay. So the first question is, how do we push automation to companies that see it as secondary, that reflects on our work as well being support only?
We don't. We don't push automation as an automation thing. Automation is a means to an end. So we start looking at business goals. We start looking at deadlines. We start looking at cost. And I don't mean dollars and cents necessarily cost. What I'm looking at is, okay, we are spending X amount of time doing some task. If we got some computers to do that task for us, or at least to help us with that task, here's how much we would save from a time standpoint, from an effort standpoint, or whatever. So no, we don't go in, we do not go in and sell automation. We go in and we sell or promote or recommend efficiency and effectiveness. So that will get you a little farther, maybe a lot farther than just, hey, we should be doing automation.
Sure. Sure. So let's look at the next question. What AI platforms can be used to help developers with unit testing?
All of them, none of them. And really, that's way too broad of a question for me to be able to answer. If I were to be brought in as a consultant and you asked me that question, we would sit down for a while and talk about what challenges do you have, what goals are you trying to accomplish, and then let's see which technologies are out there that can help us do that. So I cannot recommend anything cold like this simply because everything is context sensitive.
Let's look at the next question now. What are the key benefits of automating software testing in today's development environment?
So this is sort of related to the last question. The benefit is what you want from it. If you want to have a faster time to market, then you should focus your test automation on that. If you want to expand your coverage because you have bug leakage or defect leakage or something like that, you should focus your automation on that. If it is, I want unattended push out to the customers, to the clients, to the users, and have testing automated for you along the way. There are a lot of risks associated with that, but if that's what you want, then you should build your automation for that. Because remember, automation is not a thing unto itself. Automation is a force multiplier. It is in support of testers doing testing. So think of it as a way, again, to make testers more effective and more efficient.
Sure. So next up, how does automation development compare to traditional software development in terms of required skills and expertise?
You know what? 15, 20 years ago, I'd have said it was different. Now I think they're similar from just a raw programmatic standpoint, because a lot of things are assemblies now, right? You take this library and this library and this NuGet package and this Maven thing, and you hook them all together, and then you have a web page. It's similar um, with Playwright and Selenium and some of these other tools. It really, though, has to go into what are your weird cases. If you're just doing web development and web test automation, the skills are probably similar. Different skill sets, though, right? But just the acumen standpoint. But if you're talking about, hey, we've got some embedded software that's going to go into, it's going to go into a pacemaker. Well, I suspect that your testers probably also, or your automation people also have to have the level of acumen to be able to push and poke the individual bits and bytes and whatever that goes into the pacemaker to get the answers back out. So, are they equal? No, I don't know. It really depends, situation to situation. But to say, oh, hey, developers have to have this super high, I have to have a master's degree in computer science, but I can write your test automation because I went to community college, might be true, but it's not always true. And there's nothing wrong with community college at all. And I've got a master's degree in computer science. The last time I used the stuff I learned in my master's degree was about 20 years ago. So all of it matters is how can we, the large we, developers, program managers, VPs, testers, everybody, how can we get the software out the door with the appropriate level of quality in the appropriate time? That's all that matters. Everything else, degrees, programming languages, all that stuff, that's merely stuff, right? Delivering the software and making a profit for your company, as cold as that sounds, is what matters.
Well, couldn't agree more on that, Paul. So this is going to be last question. I have few cases where I cannot run CI/CD pipelines due to hardware limitation, as my application need bare metal servers. How to automate in these type of cases?
If you don't have the hardware, you don't have the hardware. I mean, that's the easiest answer. Yes, could you do some things where perhaps you have something in between unit tests and actual quote user tests where some things are mocked out or faked out, or you have some fake servers or some service virtualization? Absolutely, you could do those things if they're valuable based on the money. But in general, if you don't have the hardware, you don't have the hardware. And that goes back to the business case. Hey, we can't do X and therefore Y. If X is larger than Y, then maybe you get the money. If X is smaller than Y, you don't get the money. I worked at a company one time where we said, well, I was in the organization. I didn't actually say this. It was, hey, if you spend $1 million, you put all this hardware in place, we can do capacity and load testing before Black Friday so that the site doesn't go down. The response? That is more than we lose when the site goes down. So no, we're not going to do that. Now, since then, they've actually done it because they did new math and the economics have changed. But at that time, the business decision was, no, if the site goes down, we lose less money than we would do for paying for all the equipment and having people test it. So sometimes the answer is no answer.
Thank you very much, Paul. I really appreciate you taking time and you know enlightening the audience here. It was an engaging session. So thank you very much. And for those questions that have been unanswered, please check out our community section and post your questions there. We'll try to answer it to the best of our knowledge. So thank you very much. I hope everybody have a good day. Thank you.
Alrighty. Thank you. You can always contact me through my links there. Have a good one. Thank you for your time.